This is the Erez crossing, a checkpoint between Israel and the Gaza Strip. Close to 2 million Palestinians live on the other side of this fence. They've been largely isolated from the rest of the world for more than a decade. The lives of the people who live here are shaped by the unresolved conflict between Israelis and Palestinians. Marwan Tarazi is helping to preserve Gaza's history. This box contains photographs from the 1940s through the 1970s. They're part of a huge collection from the former Kegham photo studio, which was later in the care of Tarazi and his family.
This is a picture of Anwar Sadat when he was a young officer in Gaza. These photos were taken by Kegham. Here's a picture of Mohammed Najib, the first president of the Arab Republic of Egypt. This is Che Guevara when he came to Gaza in 1959. He was welcomed by the mayor and some other local dignitaries. Here's Che meeting some Egyptian officers who worked for the military administration. This is the train station of the railroad that connected Gaza and Egypt. The station was later torn down.
For Marwan Tarazi, these photos are a treasure trove of Gaza's history. The negatives and prints reflect the culture and identity of the local residents. But only a few of the photographs have survived. Many were not properly stored and suffered significant damage from moisture. Some of the negatives were never developed. The date and location of the photographs were not always recorded. The photographs were taken by Keham J Halyang. He was born in Armenia in 1915. His mother fled the Armenian genocide and took her infant son with her to Syria. Keham later settled in Jerusalem and in the early 1940s moved to Gaza, where he started working as a photographer.
I'll tell you about Kegham. He started his photography studio in 1947. Then the war broke out, and in 1948 many Palestinians fled to Gaza and the West Bank. Kegham had experienced a similar situation in Armenia. He considered Gaza his second home and started taking pictures of various events, including the war. He archived all of his photos so that future generations could see them.
Marwan Tarazi is trying to preserve this material because it provides a detailed account of Gaza's rich and turbulent history, with displacement and loss looming large in people's collective memory. Kegham and others took these dramatic photographs in 1948. After the founding of the State of Israel that same year and the Arab-Israeli war that followed almost immediately, tens of thousands of Palestinians sought refuge in Gaza. Many were housed in refugee camps. In 1949, a United Nations agency was created to provide humanitarian aid and economic support for the refugees. Even today, many refugees and their descendants still live in refugee camps like Al-Shati. Over the years, they built houses and corrugated metal structures to replace their tents. Sharif Sarhan knows this area well. He's a photographer and artist and spent many years working for the UN's Palestinian Refugee Relief Agency. These children are fourth or fifth generation refugees. Many of the Palestinians demand that they be allowed to return to their former homes in what is now Israel and the West Bank.
I'm photographing you and she's filming me. Thanks, boss.
Like many Palestinian photographers who came before him, Sharif Sarhan believes that it's important to portray everyday life here, the stories that don't make the headlines. These crab fishermen can't go far out to sea due to restrictions imposed by the Israeli Navy.
Through my photographs, I try to portray the rich diversity of life in Gaza. All that most people know about Gaza is war, destruction, the blockade, and the occupation. But there are other sides to the story. What is life like on the street and at home? People hope and love and go to work. I try to capture all those aspects of life in my photographs.
In ancient times, Gaza was an important Mediterranean port city. It was part of the Ottoman Empire until the end of World War I. The British mandate over Palestine, including Gaza, lasted until 1948. Gaza was then administered by Egypt until 1967 and subsequently occupied by Israel following the Six-Day War. A form of Palestinian self-government was created in 1994 with the establishment of the Palestinian Authority. In 2007, the radical Islamic group Hamas took over the Gaza Strip. Israel then stepped up its control over Gaza's seacoast, airspace and land routes, citing security concerns. There have been 3 wars and several smaller conflicts in Gaza over the last decade. Palestinian militants sometimes fire rockets at nearby Israeli towns and cities. Israel responds with airstrikes. Palestinians continue to hope for the creation of their own independent state, but those hopes are fading. The Middle East peace process is currently stalled. The new generation of Palestinian photographers document the ongoing conflict as part of their work. But Sharif Sarhan also believes that he and his colleagues have an obligation to record the history of his homeland through visual representation. Through the lens of his camera, he presents his own perspective on the daily lives of Gaza residents and how they see themselves.
بس في كثير ناس تبحث عن صور قديمة.
A lot of people enjoy looking around for old photographs. They go through family photo albums to find out how their parents or grandparents lived. Our task is both important and difficult, and it's not limited to photographers. And that task is to document the lives of Palestinians today and for the next 100 years. That's probably a lot easier today than it was 50 or 70 years ago. We need to put together an archive that documents the daily lives of Palestinians from the beginning of the 20th century. But how should we do that? How do we develop this concept? Where should this archive be stored? The goal is to help people learn about their history through photographs, and not just by hearing stories about it.
Sharif Serhan is a co-founder of the artist collective called Shababik, which means windows in Arabic. Because Gaza is essentially cut off, communication with the outside world is always an issue. Few people visit the Strip, and only a small number of Gazans are able to travel via Israel to the West Bank or further afield.
We're artists, but we can't leave Gaza to visit museums in London, Paris, or Rome, or anywhere else. And we can't even go to the West Bank to see the works of other artists. Our work at the Shababik Collective is aimed at bringing the world to us. Every month, or whenever we can, we host events where Palestinian or foreign artists talk to us on Skype. We want to promote the exchange of culture, ideas, and expertise, and bring all that to Palestinian artists in Gaza.
Today, Marwan Tarazi is visiting the traditional market district. Omar al-Mukhtar is one of the oldest commercial streets in Gaza City. This is where Keham J Halyang opened his photo studio in the 1940s. Marwan Tarazi's older brother Maurice began working for Kegham and learning the art of photography in the 1960s.
والله منور منور. ايش اخبارك هتفوسه؟ شو اخبارك؟
كيف حالك؟
تمام كله تمام. كيف الشغل؟ 100 100. تتذكر هذه صورة الكغام؟
كغام
المحل القديم.
استوديو كغام.
كغام. وهذا مين كمان؟
يوسف ابو زيد جنبه. كانوا فيش يعني المصورين قلال كانوا.
كانوا
موريس وصليبه وكوكو.
كان 3 4 مصورين
بس يعني كغام كانت تقول يعني نمره واحد.
واشهرهم.
اشطر واحد كان فيهم يعني هو كغام.
هو اللي كمل فيهم.
Thousands of kilometers and a world away from Gaza, Keham J Halyang's photographic legacy is also being preserved in southwestern France. Anahit Boutin is the oldest daughter of the Armenian photographer. Anahit was born and raised in Gaza.
What memories I have of Gaza, it's happiness. He was and my mother was very welcomed in Gaza. She did not know how to speak Arabic, but she spoke French and a little bit of English then. Many of the families there, the daughters that were of her age, she was 20 only, they became very good friends together. We were very beautifully accepted in Gaza as Armenians.
Anahit Boutin grew up in Gaza in the 1950s and 60s, when the area was under Egyptian military administration. Later, she studied in Egypt. She now lives in France with her husband. When she moved to France, she brought along photographs of her family. She left her other possessions behind in Gaza. These pictures of Anahit Boutin were taken by her father.
I did go upstairs several times, in fact, to the dark room, and I would stand there with him. Now that we're talking, there is the odor of all these chemicals that are there, you know, all these buckets of chemicals. It's coming to me. I feel the odor. I remember the odor. And I would sit there with him, and I was always amazed seeing pictures appearing, you know, slowly, after it had been printed and then put in the chemicals, and the picture that starts to appear.
Her father's studio was a busy place. Only a few people owned their own cameras. Many portraits from those days have been preserved for posterity.
Everybody went to have their portraits, especially the middle class and upper middle class and lower middle class. They all went to have a portrait. Everybody was photographed by my father, I think. Either my father or my uncle, or Coco at least.
The UN Relief and Works Agency for Palestine Refugees has its own photo archive in Gaza. The photographs document the lives of refugees and their descendants over the last 70 years.
أهلا مرحبا. مروان ترازي. ولا شيء سرحان. أهلا وسهلا.
There's often a lot of detective work involved in archiving these photos. That's particularly true of older photos, where there's little or no information on where they were taken or the people who are portrayed in them.
In the old days, they used a different system for archiving than we do today. Families came to the studio, the photographer took their pictures and made a file for each family. He marked the negatives with everyone's names and stored them in a box. But a lot of ordinary negatives were filed without a date or any other information. Today, photographers keep track of everything, including the date and the place where the photo was taken. That's not how they used to do it. When I first found the archive, everything was just tossed together.
We use the same system for black and white and color photos. We write down all the details, the name of the photographer, the year it was printed, copyright date, and the credits.
هذا صورنا برضه. ما بعرف يمكن ماخذينه حق الملكية وهذه عندي.
Together, they look for clues as to the photo's provenance.
These photographers are documenting and preserving Palestinian history. Photographers around the world do this. They archive their work as art, and they document history at the same time.
Recently, much of this archive was digitized. Since the early 1950s, UN photographers have been documenting the lives of Palestinian refugees and their descendants in Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, the West Bank, and Gaza. Time and time again, the lives of Gaza residents have been impacted by international events, like the Suez Canal crisis in 1956, which led to war between Egypt and Israel.
In '56, there was the war where Israel stayed in Gaza about 5 months until March, from November till March. But I remember detail of that period as well. In fact, as we live on the main street, we were immediately sent, mother and the children, all the Armenians that were there, we were mostly all there, into the back, to the house of Maurice and Marwan. They had ancient houses near the Christian church there, the Greek Orthodox. We were sent there because it was wide, larger walls, ancient. Gaza has lots of ancient houses. But my father did not come because he wanted to stay at home, and he kept picturing. There are lots of pictures of that period, I remember. I don't have them. He did picture a lot, the coming in of the occupation of Israel.
Marwan Tarazi found these photographs of dead civilians in one of his archive boxes. It's not known when or where the photos were taken, or by whom. Even before the 1956 war, there were frequent clashes between Israeli troops and Palestinian militias along the border. There were casualties on all sides, including civilians. The war ended in November 1956. Shortly afterwards, the UN sent peacekeeping troops to patrol both sides of the border between Egypt and Israel. They stayed there until the Six-Day War broke out in June 1967.
In 1957, when the United Nations came in for the protection of Gaza, that was UNEF, Gaza became almost the free zone for Egypt. Egyptians came to buy from Gaza what they did not have. So Gaza flourished enormously, enormously in that period, that you could feel, you could see. And my father's work became even more flourishing because he was the agent for camera companies, for everything that concerns photography, the paper, the films and all. And he was the distributor for all the other photographers. And by then, many other young Palestinians that were working with, or either with my uncle or with Coco or with my father, they started their businesses as well, and it all over the rest.
During this time, a number of high-profile international visitors traveled to Gaza, including Che Guevara in June 1959. Local newspapers reported that the communist revolutionary visited the Shati refugee camp. Hollywood actor Yul Brynner also visited Gaza on behalf of the United Nations to call attention to the plight of refugees in the region. And in 1960, Indian Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru arrived in Gaza to visit Indian troops who were part of the UN peacekeeping force. Gaza's landscape has changed considerably over the years. Marwan Tarazi is trying to document this transformation. This is the Great Omari Mosque, the oldest and largest structure of its kind in the Gaza Strip. The centuries-old building was severely damaged in World War I and rebuilt in the 1920s. But some buildings have fallen into disrepair, like the former Al-Nazr cinema. Most of Gaza's movie theatres were shut down in the late 1980s, often due to political considerations. They were seen as having a liberal influence. A number of historic buildings that were no longer used have been torn down, like the former train station. Here, Marwan is visiting the site of the railroad that once operated between Gaza and Egypt.
طبعا هذه كانت تودي من غزة لمصر ومن مصر لغزة كل يوم ترين رايح جاي لو ترين اليوم ماشي شغال كان انت بتروح على مصر كلكم
انا ركبت في مصر شفنا قطار وشفنا
لو ضلت السكة كان ضل الترين
يلا بلكي تفتح البلاد ويبنوا السكة
حدا بيعرف وين المنطقة
هاي سوق البصار هاي الدكان ماشي
بس واحد
شفتها على ايام دكانة ابو نادي هاي دكانة ابو نادي دكان سامح الجوز.
The days of train travel in Gaza are long gone. Over the years, restrictions on the movements of local residents have increased. Only specific groups of people, such as those who are ill or are on business, can apply for a permit to travel via Israel. But the application process is long and complicated. The Rafah border crossing between Gaza and Egypt has been frequently shut down in recent years, usually due to political tensions. Those who want to travel to Egypt have to get permits from the Hamas authorities and the Egyptians.
نفس الشي وجع والناس ماشية الكل راسه بالأرض المدينة خايفة الحزن مش مسترجي يبكي لثانية الفرحة ضايعة والمدينة حايرة نفس الأسى موجود على المسرح وعلى المدينة ذكريات متخبية بين حيطان حزينة الناس واقفين برا زي زمان حلم الحياة ترجع لهالمكان.
Ayman Mirhamis is a rapper and music producer who collects old photographs of Gaza. He used some of these pictures in a music video he made recently. A lot of people want to leave Gaza, says Ayman, but he's decided to stay.
I found some great photos of Gaza on the internet. They show that people in the Gaza Strip and elsewhere in Palestine used to have freedom. This makes me want to write songs about the miserable conditions that we live in today and how people here used to live. The economy in Gaza and Palestine was growing. They had trains and an airport, but there's no airport in Gaza today. It's just ridiculous that back in the 60s we had an airport in the Gaza Strip. But now in 2020, we don't.
Over half of Gaza's residents are under the age of 30. Most of them have never been outside the territory. Ayman Mirhamis has come to see a friend who's also a musician. They're going to try out a new song. Musicians in Gaza don't earn a lot of money. Youth unemployment is at 60%. Full-time jobs are rare, and young people do odd jobs just to get by. Sometimes their families help out with money.
The chorus says, "Get me out of this coffin. It's not you who decides when I die. I want to breathe, but right now I feel like I'm buried. It's my right to experience life, travel, to laugh, and to plan for the future. But here in Gaza, I can't plan anything. I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. Will I still be alive? Will there be a war? I can't plan, and I can't see the horizon."
لا وانت الكاميرا جوا التابوت معاك. جوا التابوت تحط حالك بس وتكون ماسك مثلا يكون هيك مسلط عليك ضوء بحيث انه مبين انه فيش شيء فوقك غير خشبه. يعني زي كانك رسمه تحت قبر بس كيف بدك تزبط هذه؟ خذ بس كثير ناس حتستعجب من التراب اللي بيحكوا لنا لساتهم موجودين.
Some older folks have told us that they were happy back then. They say they used to travel from Gaza to Nazareth and other places, and there were no restrictions. But now there are border posts and problems based on religion and politics. The whole situation has changed. The kind of life that these older people enjoyed just doesn't exist anymore.
الحياة اللي بيحكوا عنها تختلف تماماً عن الحياة اللي موجودة اليوم.
I haven't gone to the border crossing in a long time, about 15 years. I'm 26 years old, so I should have done some traveling by now to experience other people and cultures, but I haven't.
Ayman Mirhamis teaches a rap music course at a local breakdance school. The project is called Gaza Lives. Rap is not considered part of traditional Arab music culture. The artists distribute their music via the internet. They have to get official permission to perform in public, and the authorities usually don't grant it. Sarah has written a text about life in Gaza.
زي ما حكينا المرة
ما كنت ناسي.
أعيد لك إياها.
عيد.
أنا مش زي هاي بنت عايشة حياتها بشكل عادي، صار عمري 21 سنة ولساتني مش لاقي حالي، شفت ظلم كتير ما في بحياتي رفيق ولا غالي، سلبوني حقي أخذوا كل شيء بملكه أرضي ومالي.
أنا مش زي بنت عايشة حياتها بشكل عادي، صار عمري 21 سنة ولساتني مش لاقية حالي، شفت ظلم كتير ما في بحياتي رفيق ولا غيري، سلبوني حقي أخذوا كل شيء بملكه أرضي ومالي.
أنا مش زي أي بنت عايشة حياتها بشكل عادي، صار عمري 21 سنة ولساتني مش لاقي حالي، شفت ظلم كتير ما في بحياتي رفيق ولا غالي، سلبوني حقي أخذوا كل شيء بملكه أرضي ومالي.
لا أنا مش كيوت.
أنا عشان بدي شو تقولي؟
أنا مش زي أي بنت عايشة حياتها بشكل عادي، صار عمري 21 سنة ولساتني مش لاقية حالي، شفت ظلم كتير ما في بحياتي رفيق ولا غالي، سلبوني حقي أخذوا كل شيء بملكه أرضي ومالي.
أيوة.
مش عاجباني.
الأسبوع بحكي لك زي هيك.
مش عاجباني.
بلا بطلع أوكي لا ممتاز.
هي حلوة.
Gaza is a nice city, but life here is hard. With all the conflicts and so forth. And there's no future for me here.
Marwan Tarazi is on his way to the Church of St. Porphyrius in the heart of Gaza City. Christians have played an important role in the life of Gaza for centuries. St. Porphyrius is one of the oldest active churches in Gaza City and belongs to the Greek Orthodox community, of which Marwan is a member. An estimated 1,000 Christians live in Gaza, but that number is falling. Much like other youths in Gaza, many young Christians are eager to leave the territory. Marwan has now stopped by his sister's home for a visit. After Keham J Halyang died, their brother Maurice took over the photo business in 1986. His studio became just as well known as its predecessor.
The whole family loved to work in photography. We all learned from Maurice. My sister really enjoyed photography. She'd work in the darkroom all day long. That was her hobby. She developed photos that were taken all over Gaza. Only women worked in the darkroom. Young men weren't allowed to guarantee the privacy of the people in the photographs.
Business at many traditional photo studios has fallen off in recent years. These days, more and more people are taking pictures with digital cameras or phones. The Tarazis closed their studio over a decade ago. A lot has changed in Gaza since then.
أتذكر قبل 15 سنة كل هذا كان ما فيش موجود البنيان كان البحر يبين اليوم كله سكر ما فيش بحر وكل يوم بيطلع عمارات جديدة ويعني الحياة بتشتغل كلها بنا
Gaza's population is growing rapidly. About 1.8 million people live in the small territory wedged between Egypt, Israel and the Mediterranean. Overcrowding has become a serious problem. The sea and shore are part of Gaza's soul. Local people love to come here and take a break. It's the only place, they say, where they can get away from the stress and problems of daily life. Sharif Serhan tries to capture the mood of the seashore in his photographs. People here seem to be enjoying themselves as they would on any beach, anywhere in the world.
The sea means everything to us. It provides the air we breathe and freedom and security. It's our future. It's our blue horizon.
Anahit Boutin still has strong ties to Gaza through her fond memories of the past and images of her father. She also remembers the friends she made when she lived there. She still stays in touch with one of those friends. But Anahit Boutin has not been to Gaza for more than a decade because of the travel restrictions. So the two friends talk by phone.
لسه عملنا بنعمل يلا بدي اتركك بعدين انت بتقولي لي كيف اعمل ارمي عليها كيف اطبخ ايش مقلوبه لو تشوفي نسرين بعثت لي عامله مقلوبه بتشهي صحتين برافو يا نسرين يلا مامي يلا روحي عشان نخلص شغلنا باي 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 with the Bedouin costume, me with the Bedouin costume, sitting next to television. So ridiculous. We speak like we did now, just anything. She's telling me that Nasreen, her daughter in Canada, has made a wonderful maqluba. Okay? We try to live as if life is normal. She lives as if life is normal, and I encourage her. How else can you live it? Can we keep crying all the time? And we do cry then. in spite of all the beautiful things I said about Gaza, or my joy in Gaza and my happiness in Gaza, it's true that it was a region that was constantly in war, constantly in changing situations and all. And yes, it would be very good that somebody or we put things together to keep the history, at least the history that we know of Gaza, and the documents are there. I mean, the prints are there somewhere that would represent a part of history of Gaza, an agitated history, a moving history.
The photos from Gaza connect people from different places and from different generations. Like Marwan Tarazi with his treasure trove of photographs, they all want to preserve this material for future generations. Their common goal is to keep alive the history of Gaza and the cultural identity of its inhabitants.
These negatives and prints are so important to me because this is our heritage and our civilization. All that we have left are these photographs. Everything else was destroyed in the wars and conflicts. These negatives and prints mean everything to me.